Hello everybody and welcome to Amphlett Reviews. Today we're doing a double bill Hong Kong review for last month's EUREKA lineup from One Arm Boxer and Time and Tide. Brand new kind of, fantastic 2K transfers, packed full of extras, brilliant additions. Once again, this year was packed full of Hong Kong cinema. There's so many different kind of releases from ATA, EUREKA, Criterion, or now have recently announced they're doing a box set collection from Hong Kong cinema. It's a crazy time this year and I can't keep up. Absolutely insane. But yeah, the next lineup is coming out Monday for me in the UK, which is PTU and Spooky Encounters, the Sammo Hung film. Very excited to get both of those films out. Giant Toad film and Sammo Hung film, definitely up for both of those. Hopefully they deliver. But let's talk about last month's lineup from EUREKA, One Arm Boxer and Time and Tide. One Arm Boxer was released in 1972. This is written, directed and starred by Jimmy Wong Yu, who kind of really changed the game and really laid the groundwork and the path for kind of Hong Kong cinema during the kind of early 70s, with Lai Wei around the corner, obviously Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan, really John Woo. A lot of these kind of big directors, up-and-coming directors and stars, kind of really thanked a lot of their success really to these kind of origin kind of movies kind of thing. There's a very specific line of movies during the kind of early 70s and even during the kind of late 60s kind of thing with One-Armed Swordsman and kind of Chinese Boxer, these both starring Jimmy Wong Yu as well, which also paved the way to kind of changing the format of what Hong Kong cinema can be, what it should be in terms of experimental kind of filming and kind of trickery and editing and pacing and doing different types of fight sequences and doing different types of kind of protagonists in a sense. This really is a bit of a game changer for the genre. I think it's more of an impactful historical kind of impactful movie more than the actual movie itself. The movie is one thing, but I think the significance of the film really kind of showcased where kind of Hong Kong cinema was going during that kind of early 70s. And based on kind of what I know from these other two movies, from the One-Armed Swordsman and Chinese Boxer, which also is getting a release later in the year, September 15th, I think, from the 88 films, Chinese Boxer and One-Armed Swordsman, I've actually got access to and I should be watching at some point next couple of weeks. I'm looking forward to checking that one out. But very interesting kind of character, very interesting kind of director and writer and star. I didn't realise as well, funny enough, the actual actor was in the Dragon film, Red Dragon, which stars Donnie Yen, plays the old father character and that, which is fantastic. It makes complete sense when I looked up his filmography and all the films he's done and films he's been involved with. A lot of his movies from IMDb, from what I've seen, not really easy access, not many kind of big kind of 5-star treatment releases. This is kind of one of the biggest ones he's ever done in terms of a kind of EUREKA, all a massive package kind of deal kind of thing. Obviously one or two of his movies here and there are getting re-releases or have had previous smaller releases, but most of his lineup, out of the massive amount of films he has done over his massive career kind of thing, there's only a couple that are actually available on Blu-ray or DVD. It's crazy how this happens. So my review and thoughts and opinions on One Arm Boxer, unfortunately, is going to be a little bit divided. On the one hand, it's got some very impressive kind of ambitious film style kind of cinematography that I was trying to do back in that time. I love the little kind of imperfections, the kind of like the mistakes here and there. I love the fact he was trying brave enough to do kind of big all-out fight sequences. It's kind of like the Raid of the kind of the early 70s in that sense, just an all-out series of escalation that just kind of really builds up to the very end. Just one fight leads to another fight, leads to another fight, leads to another fight. It's absolutely insane. The storyline basically follows Jim Wong Yu's character, which basically defends someone's honor in a restaurant, and it kind of leads to an all-out kind of war between another clan. The clan themselves can't defeat them because they've been humiliated in kind of fight battles kind of sense. So they hire a kind of select team of Asian kind of experts in their field of kind of Hong Kong, different martial arts styles, different kind of backgrounds in a sense, to take out this clan. And they are ruthless, they are nasty, and you get some very interesting kind of signature kind of characters, some very interesting kind of props and looks and different kind of ways of fighting, and they've all got their individual styles. And when they're kind of put to the test through our main character to fight, he has to kind of rise to the occasion. Surprisingly, he doesn't become the One-Armed Boxer until over, I'd say, just about halfway through the film, maybe a bit more, maybe an hour into the film, and becomes the One-Armed Boxer down to the fact he lost his arm during the battle. He has to kind of do a series of very quick kind of training and has to kind of really figure out how to make his one arm really invincible, really strong, and goes from a kind of pretty competent fighter during the kind of first portion of the film to basically the character from Upgrade.
Maybe, but with one arm you're useless.
Your permission to operate independently.
Permission granted!
Thank you.
But on the negative side, on the flip side, unfortunately for me, it is a little too simplistic. It is a little bit too simple. You know, for nearly a 2-hour movie, I was getting really bored really quickly. And, you know, it is of its time kind of thing. And, like, you know, I can't fault it too much. You know, the fact the film is non-stop fights, it is kind of escalations, but I don't think the fights are particularly that amazing. Only a selection, 1 or 2 here and there, I thought were really, really good. There's a really funny sequence during the kind of late portion of the film where you expect a kind of traditional kind of, you know, rebuilding up training kind of montage kind of thing, him learning his strengths and weaknesses and getting ready for that final fight. And they skipped that for this kind of series of kind of clip show kind of, you know, sequences. I think they filmed it. I swear they filmed it, but instead of just showing that footage, they just kind of made it into a very quick 1-minute kind of, you know, series of kind of pictures and kind of showing time passage in that way. It's something I expect from the Fanatical Dragons kind of lineup of kind of, you know, introductions in that sense. It's really funny. The story's a bit too simple for my liking. It's a bit too simplistic. I think the character's a bit hollow. I think the kind of love interest is non-existent. I think the bad guys, while they are fun and kooky and a bit cheesy, and there's definitely some standouts, it wasn't defined enough and, you know, smart enough to really kind of get me going. I think it overstays its welcome way too much kind of thing. And by the end, I was just kind of glad it was finished and over with, because I just wasn't really invested in this story. I wasn't invested in this kind of series of escalations. And while I do appreciate One Arm Boxer for what it did and what it's, you know, what it does for kind of Hong Kong cinema and what it offers for the director, and seeing a bit more of his work is fantastic. Unfortunately, it is a one-off cinema experience for me. I am very much looking forward to checking out One Armed Swordsman, which is an even earlier film, 1967. So I'm curious to see how this one goes. And of course, Chinese Boxer, which is coming out later in the year. So 2 more movies to compare there and to kind of see what they kind of offered. Next up from EUREKA's lineup is Time and Tide, released in 2000, directed by Troy Hark himself, the Madman director. I've mentioned him multiple times on this channel. A director that I really, really like, completely batshit, from his kind of stellar work from Once Upon a Time in China series to his Zulu Warriors, Madman movies, to his sort of okay, mid-ish, kind of okay ones. Even them have some kind of charm and quality to them. Troy Hark is a director and a kind of person that I would love to meet in real life. Really well talented, very focused kind of style, and kind of, you know, I love his kind of view on movies. You know, you never know what you're quite going to get with a Troy Hark film, and I love that in a director. Which, you know, a Wong Kar-wai or a kind of, you know, Johnny To, I've kind of got a grasp of kind of what they're like in their style. Even Jackie Chan movies, I got an idea what their style, but a Troy Hark film, I never know what I'm going to get with one of them. A complete Madman director. I have talked about him recently in my Bed Tomorrow kind of a double bill review. Talk about behind the scenes drama going on with that. But he also did, before this movie, Time and Tide, he did Van Damme's Knockoff, released in 1989, a batshit crazy movie, just a really kind of Hong Kong cinema inspired American made film, just a really crazy, super fast, hyper edited kind of 90s film. It's a blast, it's great. I really enjoyed this film a lot, and you can definitely tell that was the kind of trend going on during that kind of late 90s, early 2000s. You know, a new wave of kind of Hong Kong cinema was emerging. Definitely a lot more collaboration with Hong Kong directors and American kind of, you know, studios in that sense. Rush Hour, kind of Drive, obviously paves the way for this kind of stuff, and we're seeing like directors like John Woo doing Face Off and Mission Impossible kind of thing. It's just crazy. Van Damme, a lot of kind of Hong Kong directors in his kind of belt, you know, his lineup in a sense. So it's a very interesting kind of, you know, wave of new movies, and Hong Kong cinema was changing as well along with it. Some good, some bad kind of thing. Yeah, there's some very questionable kind of early 2000s one. There was a point where I do feel anyway, where it became a little bit too much of that kind of early 2000s kind of vibe, and they were taking inspiration from American movies, and they weren't quite working with gelling as well, or they were cheaping out to make cheaper movies, or the fight scenes weren't as strong, or, you know, you can tell that the story wasn't as well developed, and, you know, there's a lot of flaws here and there. Time and Tide's a very interesting one to try and talk about, because it's a 2000s film, even though it was made after kind of Knockoff. Knockoff was the more commercial success, being the fact it was more kind of Hong Kong inspired, you know, inspiration kind of style, kind of, you know, big budget kind of movie, and it made a lot of money during the cinemas, and it was really kind of, you know, talked about. It had a lot of marketing behind it. Time and Tide kind of slipped through the cracks a little bit, I would say. Time and Tide's a film, he went back to Hong Kong and actually made this film kind of, you know, from scratch kind of thing. It's definitely that new wave of kind of Hong Kong thrillers with action and fighting and gunplay. Helps summarise the plot of the film, and I'll read it back in the synopsis for the Eureka edition release. A street-raised young man becomes a bodyguard to score quick cash. He soon becomes friends with a disillusioned mercenary determined to make a fresh start with his new wife, although the two men find themselves working together to force assassination plot attempt. Their partnership is short-lived, although uncontrollably through uncontrollable circumstances, they will unknowingly go parallel towards the opposite sides through a deadly series of conclusions on confrontations. Now, the synopsis of the film actually sounds really good, and actually some really good kind of story beats throughout, and I can definitely see this doing quite well. I can see why people like it to some degree. It definitely has got that kind of great kind of middle edge of a kind of like a late 90s film and a really early 2000s hard-boiled kind of feel towards it. Towards the end, the stakes a little bit higher, and the main character himself is quite likable. You know, early on in the film, he kind of got someone pregnant and he's just trying to make some money for this woman kind of thing. He doesn't really know her. He just kind of accidentally got her pregnant, and she's, you know, she's having his child, and you know, she doesn't want anything to do with him. She's constantly denying the money and denying all access and just like, leave me alone. And he doesn't really care about anyone else. He just wants to help her and help his, you know, his son or unborn son as the film kind of progresses throughout the film, and he just wants to be there for her, and you know, she's constantly rejecting that. And you know, you get to know his character quite well. He's a bit slobbish, he's kind of very amateur. He definitely thinks he's more of a badass than he is. He buys a paintball gun during the film. The fight sequences are interesting, they're weird a bit. You know, the one thing I would say about Time and Tide that kind of is a disadvantage to the film, and one thing that I kind of noticed very early on while watching it, it's very unbalanced in terms of story, in terms of escalation, in terms of comedy, in terms of just the atmosphere of it. It's just a very weirdly toned film, and that's not new for Troy Hawk. I've kind of known that and to expect that with some of the films. Sometimes he goes a little bit too much on one way or the other. You know, Zulu Warriors was way too much of the kind of the batshit crazy side of it, which is great to some extent, but there's a limit where I need a little bit of a break, or I need to kind of like, okay, can you put this in there so we can get this? You know, this film doesn't quite know where to do with all of its elements. You know, it has a fight sequence and then implements comedy, but the comedy doesn't quite gel well, or the music doesn't quite fit with the tone, or there's lack of music. There's actually some fantastic sequences in the building complex during the kind of the third act of the film, and there's no music, there's no score, and it kind of really is come across a little bit kind of weak, a bit boring, even though the sequences themselves are pretty good. I'm liking the escalation, I'm liking the kind of the Bourne Identity kind of star kind of action during that kind of third act of the film, but the fact there's no score, there's no kind of hyper music, you know, to kind of really help kind of kick those scenes in, or really help the you know, the ticking time bomb out of that situation, I think is a bit lacking in place. It's just a couple of questionable decision making in terms of story and how much time we want to spend on this sequence, or do we really need to see this scene? You know, it's weird for a film that has super fast editing, very signature style from Troy Hawk that I would expect to respect, yet there's not much really to kind of speed up. In a weird way, it's super fast when it's quick editing during the kind of the first portion of the film, but yet when it's speeding up, it's not really speeding up to anything else. It's still on kind of the same scene. It's just kind of moving a little bit quicker. I just think some of the more questionable moments in terms of the story, in terms of where it's going, and even some of the better aspects, I just don't think are fully fleshed out. You know, I really like the assassination at Templar during the kind of the middle portion of the film, with the, you know, the whoopee assassin coming in there, and he's kind of thinking he's badass, he's gonna take him out, and it kind of goes horribly wrong, and he's a bit of a, you know, a bit of a dunce in that sense. You know, there's a likability to the character, and there is actually a really interesting story in there somewhere, but I just think all those elements in terms of, you know, the unbalanced nature of it really lets the film down ultimately. And again, unfortunately, very much similar to One Arm Boxer, you know, the film was dragging a little bit. It wasn't really going anywhere too interesting for me personally. You know, despite the good aspects of the film, and I definitely think it's one of the stronger early 2000s Hong Kong cinema experience, because there isn't many kind of really good ones. You know, you were starting to go on decline there kind of thing. They were starting to cheapen out a bit more. You know, they were starting to do less fight sequences, more kind of overblown story, or the story wasn't as strong, and just kind of stars talking. And you know, you can do that kind of stuff, but you know, the bar is set quite high, and something like, you know, you're going from Knockoff to this, it's kind of not the same kind of feel, and I can see why they were banking more on Knockoff to do well on the box office more than Time and Tide, because it doesn't have that same feel. There is some good stuff in Time and Tide. I liked some of the performances. You know, I like the, you know, the story overall kind of thing, and I think there's some great moments in the film in terms of the action. I just wish a lot of the other elements of the editing and the pacing, and even his hyper fast-paced editing style, doesn't really do anything to the film's kind of tone in a weird way. It's a very strange kind of film. For me personally, I don't think it really delivered what it tried to set out to do. I think it's a well done film. I think it has some great stuff in it, but for me personally, it was a bit of a miss. It didn't quite land, and you know, it's definitely a film I wouldn't revisit, unfortunately. Even though it is a great release from EUREKA, I really like the cover artwork, and I think the edition itself is great. You do get a little mini booklet as well in the edition, which has got some really great insight. It's definitely a film I appreciate in terms of his kind of career, but unfortunately it is one of the lesser ones for me personally, but that's just down to opinion. Yeah, Time and Tide, definitely worth watching for, you know, Troy Hawk. Definitely got to check out all of his movies for sure, at least if it's a one-off. You might get more out of me. I think it's definitely one of the better kind of early 2000s films. It's very interesting to see a film after Knockoff and what his style was and what he was doing after. But for me, it's a bit of a miss. So there you go, guys. It's been my Hong Kong double review, EUREKA lineup for One Arm Boxer and Time and Tide, 2 films that I got a lot out of in terms of appreciation, but not much in terms of rewatchability or in terms of revisit, unfortunately. 2 films that I felt exactly the same with. Just great potential, great concepts, but didn't quite land the kind of landing for me personally anyway. I'm looking forward to checking out PTU and Spooky Encounters, hoping they deliver a little bit more. Overall, going to comment in terms of a film I want to keep and want to own in the collection as well, for sure. So I will be doing reviews for both those films, hopefully the next couple of weeks. What are your thoughts and opinions on One Arm Boxer and Time and Tide? Am I completely wrong? Am I completely crazy? Do you love these films? Are these some of your best films in your collection? What do you think of the Blu-ray editions? You know, comment down below. Let's create a discussion, see what you guys' thoughts and opinions are. But for the meantime, guys, Amphlett Reviews, signing out.